Hey guys, tonight we step quietly through a heavy wooden gate just as the last light of day bleeds out of the sky, and you find yourself standing in the uneasy stillness of a medieval town that is about to become your responsibility. The air smells faintly of smoke, damp straw, and something you'd rather not identify too closely. Somewhere in the distance a dog barks, then another answers, and for a moment it almost feels peaceful, until you remember that you're not here to relax. You're here to keep order, keep watch, and, if things go badly, keep people alive, and honestly, you probably won't survive this. Or at least, not comfortably, because being a medieval town guard isn't the heroic, shining armour fantasy you might be imagining. It's more like standing for hours in the cold while wondering if that shadow moving near the gate is just a cat, or the start of a very long night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're watching from, and what time it is for you right now. I always love seeing how far these quiet little journeys travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun is almost gone when your shift begins. The gate behind you, thick oak reinforced with iron bands, groans as it's pulled halfway shut, not fully closed yet. Not until the last few stragglers have been checked and either allowed in, or turned away. You stand just to the side of the archway, one hand resting on a spear that feels heavier than it should, as if it's already tired for you. A real historical detail here. Most medieval towns did in fact close their gates at night. It wasn't just for dramatic effect. It was one of the simplest and most effective ways to control crime and prevent surprise attacks. Once the gates shut, anyone outside was on their own until morning, which, if you think about it, makes your job at this moment surprisingly important. A cart rattles toward you over uneven ground, its wheels squeaking in protest. The driver looks exhausted, hunched over the reins, while a couple of sacks bounce gently in the back. Grain, maybe, or something less honest. You straighten slightly, trying to look more authoritative than you feel. "Stop there," you call out, your voice echoing a little under the stone arch. The man obeys, though not quickly. No one ever moves quickly at this hour unless they have something to hide. You step closer, the torchlight flickering across his face, revealing dirt, stubble, and the kind of expression that suggests he's already had a long day, and you're about to make it longer. You ask the usual questions: where he's coming from, what he's carrying, why he's arriving so late. It's routine, but it matters. Historians still argue whether town guards were truly effective at stopping crime, or if they were more of a visible deterrent, something to make people think twice rather than actually catch them in the act. Standing here, listening to a tired man explain his delayed journey, you get the sense it's a bit of both. Behind you, another guard shifts his weight and yawns loudly, not even trying to hide it. You don't blame him. The night is only just beginning, and already it feels like it's stretching endlessly ahead. A small group approaches next. 2 women and a boy, all carrying bundles. Pilgrims, most likely. You can tell by the worn clothes and the way they move with quiet determination. They're less suspicious, but that doesn't mean you skip the questions. Rules are rules, even when they feel unnecessarily strict. As they pass through the gate, the boy glances up at you with wide, curious eyes. For a second you feel almost important, like some kind of guardian figure standing between safety and the unknown. Then a cold breeze slips through the archway, and the illusion fades. Because the truth is, you're not some legendary protector. You're underpaid, undertrained, and very aware that if something truly dangerous shows up, your spear and padded armour might not be enough. There's a quirky little tidbit about guards like you. In some towns, night watchmen were required to shout the hour and weather conditions at regular intervals. Imagine that. Wandering dark streets every hour just to yell something like, 10 o'clock and all is well. Whether it reassured people or just annoyed anyone trying to sleep is still up for debate. Back at the gate, the final travellers trickle in. A merchant with a nervous smile, a young man who avoids eye contact a bit too carefully, a pair of labourers who smell strongly of sweat and cheap ale. Each one passes under your watch, each one a tiny unknown variable in the quiet equation of the night. And then, it's time. The signal is given with a nod from the senior guard. No grand ceremony, no dramatic announcement, just a shared understanding. The gates begin to close. It takes effort. Several men pushing together, boots scraping against the ground, wood grinding against stone. The sound is slow, heavy, final. When the doors meet with a dull, echoing thud, something shifts in the air. The town is sealed. Inside, the narrow streets curl like a maze of shadows and dim torchlight. Outside, the open land stretches into darkness, uncertain and unguarded. And you, standing here, are now part of the thin line between the two. You take a breath, noticing how the sounds change. Fewer voices, more distant noises, the occasional clatter of something unseen. Night has its own rhythm, and you're about to learn it whether you want to or not. Your feet already ache slightly, and you haven't even started walking yet. But there's no time to dwell on that. Because the gate is shut, the town is yours to watch. And somewhere out there, beyond the walls, the darkness is waiting patiently, as if it knows you'll be out here all night. The moment you step away from the gate, you become much more aware of what you're wearing, or more accurately, what you're stuck inside. Your armour isn't the gleaming, perfectly fitted masterpiece you might picture from movies. It's a practical, slightly mismatched collection of pieces that have clearly seen better days, and probably several previous owners. A padded gambeson hugs your torso, thick with layers of fabric meant to soften blows but also very effective at trapping heat. Or cold, depending on the season's mood. Right now, it's doing both in the most uncomfortable way possible. Over that, you have bits of metal, maybe a chainmail shirt if you're lucky. Though lucky is a flexible term here. It hangs heavy on your shoulders, each small ring adding up to a constant dragging weight. It shifts when you move, making a soft metallic whisper, like your own personal reminder that you cannot, under any circumstances, forget what you're wearing. Not that you could. Your helmet, if you've been issued one tonight, sits awkwardly on your head, slightly too large or slightly too tight. There's rarely an in-between. It limits your vision just enough to make you uneasy, narrowing the world into a tunnel of flickering torchlight and moving shadows. You'll find yourself turning your whole body just to look at something properly, which becomes tiring faster than you'd expect. And then there's the spear. You adjust your grip on it as you walk, trying to find that balance between holding it firmly and not exhausting your arm before the night really gets going. It's longer than it needs to feel, the wooden shaft worn smooth in some places and rough in others. A simple iron tip gleams faintly ahead, catching stray light. A historical fact worth noting. Spears were one of the most common weapons for guards and soldiers alike in medieval Europe. Not because they were glamorous, but because they were cheap, effective, and easier to use than swords. Which is good news for you, considering you've had, let's say, minimal training. You shift your shoulders again, feeling the fabric underneath the armour bunch slightly. There's no such thing as a perfect fit here. Everything rubs somewhere. Your neck, your sides, under your arms. Given enough hours, those small irritations become persistent, nagging discomforts that demand your attention, even when you'd rather focus on the dark alley ahead. Your boots crunch softly against the uneven ground as you leave the gate behind and enter the first stretch of narrow street. The buildings lean inward slightly, as if they're sharing secrets over your head. Wooden beams creak faintly, and the upper floors block out what little light remains in the sky. It's darker here. You pass a torch fixed to the wall, its flame dancing lazily, and for a brief moment you feel a little warmer. Then the light fades behind you, and the chill returns, slipping through the gaps in your clothing like it knows exactly where to go. A fellow guard walks a few steps ahead, his silhouette outlined by another distant torch. You can hear the faint clink of his gear, slightly out of rhythm with yours. There's a quiet understanding between you, no need for constant conversation. Talking too much wastes energy, and besides, the night listens. Still, he mutters something under his breath. Armour gets heavier every hour, he says. You almost smile. He's not wrong. There's a strange psychological trick to it. The weight doesn't actually increase, of course, but your body begins to feel it more and more. Your shoulders tighten, your back protests, even your hands start to ache from gripping the spear. Historians still argue whether most town guards were well equipped by their communities, or if they were expected to provide much of their own gear. In wealthier towns, you might have something closer to standardized equipment. In poorer ones, well, you wear what you can get and you hope it's enough. You glance down briefly at your sleeve, noticing a small tear that's been roughly stitched. Not by you, probably. Passed down, reused, repaired. and reused again. There's a quiet history in every piece of clothing you wear. Layers of other guards who stood where you stand now, felt what you're feeling, and likely complained in exactly the same way. A faint sound echoes somewhere ahead. You stop, not dramatically, just a slight pause, a shift of your weight, your attention sharpening. The other guard notices immediately, his head tilting slightly as he listens. There it is again, a soft scraping noise, maybe a door, maybe a loose shutter, maybe something else. You tighten your grip on the spear, suddenly very aware of how exposed you feel despite all this armour. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of what you're wearing is designed to protect you from direct attacks, not from the unknown creeping quietly through a dark street. You take a cautious step forward. The noise stops. Of course it does. There's a quirky detail about medieval armour that rarely gets mentioned. Contrary to popular belief, it wasn't always unbearably heavy. A full suit of well-made plate armour could be surprisingly manageable, but that's not what you have. What you have is a patchwork of practical pieces, likely heavier in the wrong places and lighter where it matters most. And right now, it feels like you're carrying all of it on your shoulders. You exhale slowly, the tension easing just a little. Probably nothing, the other guard whispers. Probably. That word does a lot of work out here. You continue walking, your pace measured, your senses stretching into the darkness ahead. Every small movement feels amplified. The shift of your armour, the soft thud of your boots, even your own breathing. And yet, despite all the discomfort, there's a strange rhythm forming. Step, clink, step, clink. The town is quieter now, but not silent. It never is. Somewhere a baby cries briefly before being soothed. Somewhere else, laughter lingers from a tavern that hasn't quite settled down. Life continues, even as most people sleep, and you walk through it all, wrapped in layers of cloth and metal, carrying a weapon you hope you won't need, feeling every ounce of the job pressing down on you, literally and otherwise. By the time you reach the next corner, your shoulders already ache, your neck feels stiff, and your patience is being tested by something as simple as your own equipment. And the night has barely begun. You don't get far into your patrol before the quiet starts to feel suspicious. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, not the soft, sleepy stillness you might expect from a town settling into the night. This is a more alert kind of silence, like the streets themselves are listening, waiting for something to happen. And, as it turns out, something usually does. It begins with footsteps, faint at first, uneven. Approaching the inner side of the gate you left behind not too long ago, you and the other guard exchange a quick glance. No words, just that shared understanding again. And you turn back, retracing your steps with a little more purpose than before. Because one thing you learn quickly in this job is that people who move around after curfew are rarely doing so for innocent reasons. When you arrive, you see him. A man wrapped in a rough cloak standing just inside the gate area as if he slipped in at the very last moment. He's shifting his weight from foot to foot, glancing around with the kind of nervous energy that practically announces, "Yes, I'm definitely worth questioning." You sigh internally. Of course he is. You approach slowly, letting the faint clink of your armour announce your presence before your voice does. "Evening," you say, not unfriendly, but not exactly warm either. He startles slightly. That's never a great sign. "Evening, sir," he replies, a little too quickly. "Sir. That's generous." You look him over. Cloak, worn boots, hands that look like they've worked hard, but also hands that are currently empty. No visible tools, no goods, no clear reason for being here at this hour, which means you ask where he came from, why he's out so late, where he's headed. The questions are simple, but they're part of a system that's been used for generations. A real historical detail. Many medieval towns enforce strict curfews, often signalled by a bell at sunset. After that, anyone found wandering without a good reason could be detained, fined, or worse. And right now, you are that system. He gives you answers, of course. They're not terrible answers, not obviously false, but there's something about them that doesn't quite settle right. Maybe it's the way he avoids your eyes. Maybe it's how his story shifts slightly the second time he tells it. Historians still argue whether guards like you relied more on instinct or strict procedure when dealing with suspicious individuals. Standing here, you realise it's probably a mix. You follow the rules, but you also trust that quiet, nagging feeling that something isn't quite adding up. Behind you, the other guard shifts, his spear tapping lightly against the ground. You let the silence stretch for a moment. It's a small trick, but an effective one. People tend to fill silence when they're nervous, and sure enough, the man starts talking again, adding details you didn't ask for. That's when you notice it. A faint smell. Not strong, just enough to catch your attention. Something slightly sweet, slightly sharp. Not grain, not cloth, not anything ordinary. You tilt your head a little. "What are you carrying?" you ask. He hesitates, just for a second. Then he shrugs. "Nothing, sir. Just my things." Your gaze drops to the cloak again. It's bulky in an odd way, hanging unevenly on one side. There's a quirky historical tidbit here. Smuggling was surprisingly common in medieval towns. People tried to avoid taxes on goods like wine, salt, or spices by sneaking them in after hours. Sometimes they'd hide items in false-bottom bags, or, in less subtle cases, simply under their cloaks. You step closer. He takes a small step back. That's all the confirmation you really need. "Open it," you say, gesturing toward the cloak. For a moment you think he might run. Your grip tightens on the spear, your body tensing in a way that feels both instinctive and slightly panicked. Because while you're prepared for this in theory, in practice, you're very aware that you'd rather not chase someone through dark, twisting streets in armour that already feels too heavy. But he doesn't run. Instead, he sighs. It's the kind of sigh that carries defeat with it, like he knew this moment was coming the second he stepped inside the gate. Slowly, reluctantly, he opens the cloak. Inside, tucked awkwardly against his side, are small wrapped bundles. You don't need to unwrap them to guess what they are. Wine, most likely. Or maybe spices. Something worth enough to sneak, but small enough to hide. You glance at the other guard. He shrugs slightly. Not dangerous, just illegal. And that's where things get complicated. Because this isn't some hardened criminal. This is a tired man trying to get around a system that probably makes his life harder than it needs to be. If you report him, he could be fined heavily. Maybe even jailed for a short time. If you let him go, well, you're not exactly doing your job. You shift your weight, feeling the armour press against your shoulders again, as if reminding you of your role. You're not here to decide what's fair, you're here to enforce. Still, there's a pause, a human pause, the kind that doesn't exist in rule books. In some towns, guards were known to take small bribes in situations like this, look the other way in exchange for a coin or two. Historians debate how widespread that practice really was, but standing here now, you can see how easily it might happen. The man watches you carefully, waiting, hoping. You exhale slowly. "Next time," you say, your voice low, "you come before the gate closes." His shoulders drop slightly, relief washing over him. You step back, giving him just enough space to pass. "Go home," you add. He doesn't argue, doesn't thank you either. Not out loud. But the way he moves, a little faster now, a little lighter, says enough. Within seconds, he disappears into the maze of streets. You stand there for a moment, staring after him. Then you turn away, because the night doesn't pause for small decisions like that. There will be more footsteps, more questions, more moments where you have to choose between strict duty and quiet understanding, and each one will linger a little longer than you expect. You adjust your grip on the spear again, rolling your shoulders as the weight settles back into place. The streets ahead stretch into darkness, full of unknowns, full of possibilities, and somewhere out there you already know, the next suspicious figure is walking toward you. You leave the gate behind again, this time with a slightly heavier mind than before. The streets pull you inward, narrowing as you go, the buildings leaning closer like silent witnesses to your patrol. Whatever light remains comes from scattered torches and the occasional glow leaking through shuttered windows. It's just enough to see where you're going, and just dim enough to make you question what you think you see. Your boots press into the uneven ground, packed dirt mixed with stray stones, and each step sends a dull, familiar ache through your legs. The rhythm from earlier returns, step, clink, step, clink. Except now it feels louder. Not actually louder, of course, but in these tighter streets with walls on either side, every small sound seems to bounce back at you. Your own presence becomes harder to ignore, as if the town is gently reminding you that you don't quite belong to the night the way it does. A torch flickers ahead, casting long, shifting shadows that stretch across the alley like slow-moving fingers. You follow them, your spear angled slightly forward, not in aggression but in quiet readiness. Patrolling isn't about constant action, it's about attention. A real historical fact: many medieval towns relied on regular patrol routes, often walked in pairs or small groups, to deter crime simply through visibility. The idea was simple. If people knew guards were nearby, they were less likely to cause trouble. Whether that always worked, well, that's another matter. Historians still argue whether these patrols significantly reduced crime, or if most offences simply happened out of sight in places guards rarely reached. And as you turn into a narrower lane, one that seems almost designed to avoid notice, you start to suspect the answer leans toward the latter. The air here feels different, cooler, damp. You catch the faint smell of something unpleasant. Waste, probably, dumped somewhere it shouldn't be. Medieval towns didn't exactly have modern sanitation, and the streets reflect that in ways your nose is still getting used to. You breathe shallowly and keep moving. To your left, a wooden door creaks slightly in the breeze. You stop for a moment, watching it sway just a fraction before settling again. No movement behind it, no voices. Still, you wait. Because rushing past small details is how you miss the important ones. A soft sound echoes from above, a shutter tapping lightly against a wall. You glance up, your neck protesting slightly as the helmet shifts with the motion. Nothing but dark windows and angled rooftops. It's almost peaceful. Almost. Then something moves at the far end of the alley. You freeze. It's quick, low to the ground, a shadow slipping from one side to the other. Your grip tightens instantly, heart giving a small, unwelcome jump. For a brief moment, your mind runs ahead of you. A thief? Someone hiding? Something worse? You take a careful step forward. The shadow reappears, and then a cat. It pauses mid-step, its eyes catching the torchlight and reflecting back at you like two small glowing coins. For a second, you and the cat simply stare at each other, both equally unimpressed. Then it flicks its tail and disappears into a gap between buildings. You exhale, a little more sharply than you intended. There's a quirky detail about medieval towns. Cats were actually quite important. They helped control rats, which were not just a nuisance but a serious health risk. Of course, at night, when your imagination is already working overtime, they're also very good at convincing you that something far more dramatic is happening. You shake your head slightly, more at yourself than anything else, and continue on. The alley opens into a slightly wider street, though wide is a generous term. A faint glow spills from a nearby tavern, its door not quite closed. Voices drift out, low, uneven, the kind that suggests people are lingering longer than they should. You slow your pace. This is where things tend to get unpredictable. Inside, someone laughs too loudly. Another voice responds, sharper, edged with irritation. You don't need to see it to know what's happening. The night is settling, but not everyone is ready to let it. You exchange a glance with the other guard. He gives a small, knowing nod. Not yet, that nod says, but soon. You linger just long enough to listen. The voices rise, then fall again. No crash, no sudden movement. Whatever tension was building seems to ease, at least for now. You move on, though you both know you'll likely be back before long. Because taverns are like that. They simmer. Further down the street, the town feels quieter again. Doors are closed, windows dark. The occasional candle flickers behind thin shutters, but most people are asleep, wrapped in whatever comfort they can manage. And you walk past it all, an outsider to their rest. Your shoulders ache more now. Your neck feels stiff. Even your hands, gripping the spear, are starting to tire in that slow, creeping way that builds over hours. You shift your hold slightly, trying to ease the strain, but it only helps a little. This is the part no one really talks about. Not the danger, not the drama, just the endurance. The long stretches of nothing happening, where your only real challenge is staying alert despite the monotony. It's easy to imagine a guard's life as a series of exciting moments, but in reality it's mostly this: walking, watching, waiting, and hoping that when something does happen, you're ready for it. You pass another intersection, pausing briefly to listen. Nothing. Just the faint whisper of wind and the distant echo of that tavern's lingering voices. You move on. The town stretches ahead, a maze of shadows and dim light, each corner hiding something unseen, each doorway holding its own quiet story. And you, wrapped in your uncomfortable armour, carrying your simple weapon, are expected to make sense of it all, or at least keep it from falling apart. Step, clink, step, clink. The rhythm continues, and somewhere behind you, faint and distant, a bell begins to ring, slow, measured, marking the passing of time in a way that feels both grounding and slightly ominous. Another hour gone, many more to endure. The bell doesn't just mark time, it controls it. You pause for a moment as its slow, steady ringing rolls across the rooftops, echoing through narrow streets and bouncing off stone walls until it seems to come from everywhere at once. It's not loud enough to startle anyone awake, but it's just persistent enough that no one inside the town can completely ignore it. This is how the night is measured. Not by clocks, those are rare, expensive, and not particularly reliable, but by sound, by repetition, by a system that depends less on precision and more on routine. You tilt your head slightly, listening as the final note fades into the background. Somewhere nearby, another guard's voice rises into the darkness. Hour past sunset, all is well. It's not particularly enthusiastic, more like a tired announcement stretched thin by repetition. Still it carries. The words drift through the streets, slipping past closed shutters and under doors, reassuring anyone who happens to be awake that, at least for now, nothing has gone terribly wrong. A real historical fact. In many medieval towns, watchmen were required to call out the hour throughout the night. It wasn't just about timekeeping, it was also proof that they were awake, alert, and doing their job. Because as you might imagine, standing around in the dark for hours makes it very tempting to not do that. You resume walking, your voice still silent for now, though you know your turn will come, and when it does, you'll shout too, even if no one's listening. The street ahead opens into a small square, little more than a widening in the road where a well sits at the centre. During the day, this place would be busy, people gathering water, exchanging gossip, arguing over small things that somehow feel important. Now, it's empty. The well stands alone, its wooden frame creaking softly as the wind brushes past. A bucket sways slightly, tapping against the stone edge in a slow, irregular rhythm. You stop for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the dim light. This is one of those places where rules matter most. Curfews, especially. Because while the rest of the town might tolerate the occasional late wanderer, open spaces like this are where trouble tends to gather. Too visible to hide in, but too central to ignore. You scan the edges of the square, doorways, alleys, corners where shadows pool just a little too thickly. Nothing moves. Good. Curfew enforcement might sound simple, but it carries a surprising amount of weight. Once that bell rings at sunset, people are expected to stay inside unless they have a legitimate reason to be out. No casual wandering, no late-night strolls, definitely no gathering in groups where things can escalate quickly. Historians still argue whether these curfews were primarily about safety or control. On one hand, fewer people outside meant fewer opportunities for crime. On the other, it also meant authorities had a much easier time monitoring everyone's movements. Standing here in the quiet centre of a sleeping town, you can see both sides. It's peaceful, but it's also restrictive. A faint sound breaks the stillness. Footsteps. You turn immediately, your attention snapping toward the source. From the far side of the square, a figure emerges slowly from a side street. Not running, not sneaking, just walking, deliberate, unhurried, as if the rules simply don't apply. You narrow your eyes slightly, that's unusual. Most people who break curfew do it quietly, hoping not to be noticed. This person seems almost unconcerned. You step forward, your presence more visible now as the torchlight catches your armour. "Halt!" you call out. The figure stops. For a moment neither of you moves. Then slowly they step closer. An older man wrapped in a simple cloak, his posture slightly bent but his gaze steady. He doesn't look nervous. If anything, he looks mildly inconvenienced. "I'm heading home," he says, before you even ask. You raise an eyebrow. "After curfew," you reply. He shrugs, as if that detail barely registers. "Was delayed." It's not a particularly convincing explanation, but it's not entirely unreasonable either. This is where the job gets repetitive. You ask the same questions again. Where he's been, why he's out, where exactly he lives. His answers are straightforward, if a little brief. No obvious signs of deceit, no strange behaviour, just a man who's late. There's a strange balance here. Too strict, and you become the kind of guard everyone resents. Harsh, inflexible, quick to punish. Too lenient, and the rules start to lose meaning altogether. You study him for a moment longer. He meets your gaze without flinching. That helps. There's a quirky historical detail about curfews. The word itself comes from the French phrase couvre-feu, meaning cover fire. Originally, it referred to the practice of covering hearth fires at night to prevent accidental blazes. Over time, it became associated with the broader idea of shutting things down after dark, which means, in a way, you're not just enforcing silence, you're enforcing safety. You exhale quietly. Go on, you say, stepping aside. He nods once, not exactly grateful, but not dismissive either, and continues across the square. His footsteps fade quickly, swallowed by the surrounding streets. You watch him disappear. Another decision made. Another small moment that won't be recorded anywhere, won't be remembered by anyone except you. And even then, probably not for long, because the night is full of them. You turn back toward the well, your eyes scanning the empty space one more time. Still quiet, still under control, for now. From somewhere in the distance, another voice calls out the hour, slightly out of sync with the earlier bell. All is well, it echoes faintly. You shift your grip on the spear again, rolling your shoulders as the familiar weight settles in deeper. It's strange how quickly your body adapts to discomfort, accepting it as the new normal. You step away from the square, heading back into the winding streets. Behind you, the well creaks softly once more. Ahead of you, the shadows stretch on. And above it all, unseen but always present, the quiet rules of the town continue to shape every movement, every decision, every step you take through the night. Because here, in this place, even silence is enforced. You don't have to go far before the night decides to get louder. It starts as a ripple, raised voices spilling into the street from that same tavern you passed earlier. The door is open now, not just slightly, but wide enough for light and noise to pour out in uneven bursts. Laughter mixes with something sharper, something that doesn't quite belong in a friendly conversation. You slow your pace instinctively. Your partner exhales through his nose. There it is, he mutters, as if the night has finally delivered what it promised. Taverns are predictable like that. They simmer, like you noticed before, and if left alone long enough, they boil over. You approach carefully, not rushing in just yet. Experience, or at least observation, has already taught you that bursting into a situation too quickly can make things worse. Better to listen first. Let the shape of the problem reveal itself. Inside, someone slams a cup onto a wooden table. Another voice responds, louder now. You calling me a liar? I'm saying you are one. Ah, classic. You exchange a glance with the other guard again. No words needed this time. You both know what's coming next. A real historical fact. Tavern brawls were extremely common in medieval towns. Alcohol, cramped spaces, and long, difficult lives made arguments almost inevitable. Guards like you were often called in not just to stop fights, but to prevent them from escalating into something far more serious. A chair scrapes loudly. There's a sudden shift in the tone inside, a tightening, like a rope being pulled too far. That's your cue. You step through the doorway. The warmth hits you first, thick and immediate, carrying the smells of ale, sweat, and smoke. After the cool air outside, it feels almost overwhelming. Your eyes take a moment to adjust to the brighter light, flickering from several candles and a low-burning hearth. The room goes quieter when you enter. Not silent, but quieter. Conversations dip. Heads turn. You feel it instantly, that shift in attention, the way your presence changes the atmosphere just by existing in it. In the centre of the room, two men stand facing each other, tension drawn tight between them. One grips the edge of a table, knuckles pale. The other leans forward slightly, jaw clenched, eyes sharp with irritation. Between them, a spilled drink. Of course, it's almost always something small. You take a few slow steps forward, letting the soft clink of your armour fill the space. Not aggressive, just noticeable. Evening, you say, your voice steady. Neither man responds immediately. They're too focused on each other. You glance at the other guard, who moves slightly to the side, creating a subtle angle between the two men. Not surrounding them, just making it harder for either to ignore that they're no longer alone in this. You want to take this outside, you continue, or are we done here? The man on the left scoffs. He started it. Did not. You resist the urge to sigh. Historians still argue whether guards were trained in de-escalation or simply relied on authority and presence to control situations like this. Judging by your own experience so far, it's mostly the latter. You step a little closer. Doesn't matter who started it, you say. Matters who finishes it. That seems to land. Not perfectly, not immediately, but enough. The tension shifts again, loosening just slightly. There's a quirky detail about tavern culture. Some places had unofficial rules that discouraged violence, not out of kindness, but because broken furniture and injured patrons were bad for business. Tavern owners often preferred arguments to stay verbal, at least until they couldn't anymore. The owner standing behind the counter watches you closely. There's a quiet hope in his expression, like he's silently urging you to fix this without too much damage. You don't blame him. The man on the right exhales sharply, stepping back half a pace. It's small, but it's enough. The other hesitates, then mirrors the movement. There it is. The moment where things can either settle or snap again. You hold your ground. No sudden moves, no raised voice, just presence. Sit down, you say, gesturing toward the table. There's a pause. Then, reluctantly, they do. Not friends, not even close. But no longer about to throw fists either. You nod once. Good. The room slowly begins to breathe again. Conversations pick back up, quieter at first, then gradually returning to their previous volume. The tension disperses, like smoke thinning in the air. You turn slightly, scanning the rest of the tavern. A few curious looks, a couple of amused smirks. One man raises his cup toward you in silent acknowledgement before taking a long drink. You ignore that. Your job isn't to be liked or celebrated, just effective. You step back toward the door, your partner following, both of you careful not to turn your backs completely until you're certain the situation is stable. Outside, the cool air feels almost refreshing. You take a slow breath, letting it settle your thoughts. That was easy, the other guard says. You glance at him. Too easy, you reply, because it usually is, until it isn't. Tavern disputes don't always end with a few words and a tense truce. Sometimes they explode into full fights, broken tables, thrown mugs, people getting hurt in ways that linger far longer than the argument itself. Tonight, you got lucky, or maybe just experienced enough to step in at the right moment. You adjust your grip on the spear again, feeling the familiar ache in your arms, the steady weight of your armour pressing down. The night continues. It doesn't care about small victories. From inside the tavern, laughter rises again, louder this time, as if the earlier tension never existed. It's almost impressive how quickly people can shift from anger to amusement, given the right circumstances. You move on, back into the dim streets where the light fades quickly and the sounds soften into distant echoes. Step, clink, step, clink. The rhythm returns, steady and unchanging, and somewhere ahead you already know. The next problem is waiting. You don't realize how much you're listening for it, until you are. Not voices, not footsteps. Fire. It begins as a thought more than a sound. Because in a place like this, tight wooden buildings pressed shoulder to shoulder, roofs that nearly touch, straw, timber, cloth everywhere, fire isn't just a possibility. It's a constant, quiet threat. Something that doesn't need much to grow from a spark into something unstoppable. You slow your pace slightly, your eyes drifting upward more often now, scanning rooftops, chimney lines, any hint of smoke against the dark sky. Most of the town sleeps with small hearth fires burning low, some covered, some not quite as carefully as they should be. A single mistake, a knocked-over candle, a neglected ember, can change everything. A real historical fact. Medieval towns were extremely vulnerable to fires, and entire districts could be destroyed in a matter of hours. In some cases, towns enforced strict nighttime rules about extinguishing or covering fires precisely because of this danger. You pass a narrow row of houses, their upper floors leaning so close together they nearly meet above the street. It creates a kind of tunnel, trapping the air and dimming the already faint light. If fire starts here, you don't finish the thought. You don't need to. Historians still argue whether night guards were primarily responsible for spotting fires early, or if that duty fell more on the general population. But out here, walking these streets, it feels like it's yours, at least partly. If something starts, you're one of the first who might notice, and one of the first expected to react. A faint glow catches your attention. You stop. It's subtle, just a flicker, slightly brighter than the others, coming from a window halfway down the street. Not unusual on its own. People keep candles lit sometimes. Maybe someone is awake. Maybe they forgot to put it out. Still, you watch it. The glow shifts, moves slightly. Your grip tightens on the spear again, though you're not entirely sure why. Habit, maybe. Or the simple instinct that something isn't quite right. You step closer. The light grows a little stronger. Too strong. You're not sure yet. Your partner notices your pause following your gaze. "What is it?" he asks quietly. You nod toward the window. He squints. For a moment neither of you moves. Then, a thin curl of smoke slips out through the edge of the shutter. Your stomach drops. There it is. "Fire," you say, low but urgent. The word changes everything. Your body moves before your mind fully catches up. You step forward quickly now, boots striking the ground harder, the rhythm broken. The quiet patrol is gone, replaced by something sharper, faster. You reach the door beneath the window and pound on it with the base of your spear. "Up! Wake up! Fire!" No response. You hit it again, louder. Inside, something stirs. A voice, confused, groggy. "What?" "Fire," you repeat, louder now. "Get up." The door creaks open just enough for a face to appear, blinking into the night. An older woman, hair loose, expression still caught between sleep and understanding. You point upward. Her eyes follow. For a split second, nothing. Then, realization. She gasps and disappears inside. You step back, scanning the roofline now, watching for any sign that the fire is spreading. The smoke is still thin. That's good. That means it's early. Contained, maybe. If you're lucky. There's a quirky historical tidbit here. Many towns kept basic firefighting tools ready, like buckets, hooks, and ladders. In an emergency, people would form bucket chains from wells or rivers, passing water hand to hand in a desperate attempt to control the flames. But those only work if you act fast. Very fast. The door bursts open again, the woman now fully awake, clutching a cloth. Behind her, you hear frantic movement, others waking, voices rising, confusion turning into urgency. "Water!" she calls inside. Your partner moves off immediately, heading toward the well you passed earlier. No hesitation, no discussion. This is one of those moments where everyone knows what to do, or at least tries to. You remain where you are, eyes fixed on the window. The glow flickers again, still contained, still small. You hope. Minutes stretch strangely in situations like this. Each second feels longer, heavier, as you wait to see if the fire grows or fades. A man appears at the window, throwing it open fully. Smoke spills out more freely now, but so does the light. He leans out, coughing slightly, then disappears again. Water splashes somewhere inside. Another voice shouts, then another. The street begins to stir. Doors open, heads peek out. People wake not to the sound of the bell this time, but to urgency, to the sharp edge of something that demands attention. Historians often debate how coordinated these responses really were, whether towns had organised fire brigades, or if it was mostly chaotic, neighbour-helping neighbour action. Watching this unfold, you can see both. It's messy, but it's happening. Your partner returns, breath slightly heavy, carrying a bucket. Others follow, residents half-dressed, some barefoot, all moving with that same hurried determination. The bucket chain begins, clumsy at first, then smoother. Water moves from hand to hand, sloshing, spilling, but still reaching its destination. You step back slightly, letting them work, your role shifting from responder to watcher again. You scan the surrounding buildings, checking for sparks, for any sign the fire might leap from one structure to another. That's the real danger. Not just the fire itself, but its hunger. But tonight, it seems contained. Slowly, gradually, the glow in the window dims. The smoke thins. The frantic energy softens, turning into tired relief. No roaring flames, no spreading blaze, just a close call. You exhale, only now realizing how tense your body had become. Another small victory, another disaster avoided. The woman steps outside again, looking up at the window, then at you. She nods once. Not a grand gesture, just a quiet acknowledgement. You return it. No words needed. The bucket chain dissolves, people drifting back to their homes, murmuring softly, the excitement already fading into something that will be talked about in the morning. You remain for a moment longer, watching the now dark window. Then you turn away, because the night isn't over, and somewhere out there, you know, another spark could already be waiting. The cold doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in, slowly, patiently, slipping through the seams of your clothing, settling into your fingers first, then your toes, and eventually making its way deeper until it feels like it's sitting somewhere behind your ribs. You notice it more when you climb. The path to the wall isn't steep, but it's enough to remind your legs how tired they already are. Stone steps, worn smooth by years of use, curve upward along the inner side of the town's defences. Your boots scrape lightly as you ascend, the sound echoing faintly in the enclosed space. Step, clink, step, clink. Even the rhythm feels colder up here. When you reach the top, the wind greets you immediately, not violently, just insistently. It brushes against your face, slips under the edge of your helmet, tugs lightly at your cloak. Out here, there's nothing to block it. No buildings, no narrow alleys to trap the air. Just open space and the long, dark stretch beyond the walls. You move toward the parapet, resting a hand briefly on the rough stone. It's colder than you expected. You pull it back instinctively. From here, the town looks different, quieter, smaller. The scattered lights below seem softer, more distant, as if you're no longer part of the same world. And beyond the walls, nothing. Just darkness. A real historical fact. Town walls were not only defensive structures, but also observation points. Guards were often stationed along them at night to watch for approaching threats, bandits, rival forces, or even just unfamiliar travellers moving at unusual hours. You lean slightly forward, peering out into that darkness. Your eyes try to adjust, searching for shapes, movement, anything that might suggest life beyond the reach of the torchlight. But it's difficult. The night outside the walls feels deeper, thicker, like it absorbs detail instead of revealing it. Historians still argue how effective these nighttime watches really were. Without proper lighting or advanced visibility, spotting anything at a distance would have been challenging at best. And yet, the act of watching still mattered, because sometimes it's not about what you see, it's about being there to see it. A faint sound carries on the wind. You straighten slightly. It's distant, hard to place, maybe just the rustle of trees, maybe something else. You hold still, listening. Nothing follows, just the wind again. Your partner joins you at the wall, pulling his cloak tighter around himself. "Cold tonight," he mutters. You nod. That feels like an understatement. Winter nights like this stretch time in strange ways. Minutes feel longer. Hours feel endless. Your body becomes more aware of every discomfort, every small ache amplified by the chill. Your fingers tighten around the shaft of your spear, partly for grip, partly to keep them moving. Stillness is the enemy here. The moment you stop moving, the cold settles in deeper. There's a quirky detail about guards on winter watch. Some would stamp their feet or shift constantly, not out of impatience, but necessity. Standing still for too long wasn't just uncomfortable, it could become dangerous. You try it now, subtly shifting your weight from one foot to the other. It helps. A little. Below, the town remains quiet. A few lights flicker, then go out one by one as people drift deeper into sleep. The earlier tension, the fire, the tavern, the questioning at the gate, feels distant now, like it happened hours ago instead of just earlier in the same night. Up here, everything feels slowed, muted. Even your thoughts seem quieter. You glance along the length of the wall, noticing another guard further down, his silhouette barely visible against the faint glow of a torch. He stands still, almost statue-like, watching his own stretch of darkness. It's a lonely job, this part. Separated not just by distance, but by the simple fact that each of you is responsible for a different piece of the unknown. You look outward again. The land beyond the walls is mostly farmland, though at night it's impossible to see the details. Fields, paths, maybe a distant tree line, all swallowed by shadow. Somewhere out there, roads connect this town to others, carrying traders, travellers, and sometimes less welcome visitors. Bandits, for example. They're more common than most people inside the walls would like to think. You imagine them for a moment. Figures moving quietly through the darkness, watching the town the way you're watching them. Waiting for an opportunity, a weakness. A moment when vigilance slips. It's not a comforting thought. You adjust your stance again, rolling your shoulders under the weight of your armour. It feels heavier in the cold somehow, less forgiving. Every movement slightly stiffer than before. Your breath fogs faintly in front of you. You watch it drift away. There's something strangely calming about this part of the watch, despite the discomfort, the simplicity of it. Just you, the wall, and the dark expanse beyond. No questions to ask, no arguments to settle, just looking and waiting. Time passes, though it's hard to say how much. The bell hasn't rung again yet, but it feels like it should have by now. That's another trick of the night, the way it stretches and compresses time until your sense of it becomes unreliable. You shift your grip on the spear again, flexing your fingers to keep them from stiffening completely. Your partner yawns. You don't comment on it. Instead, you glance outward one more time, scanning the horizon as best you can. Still nothing. No movement. No distant lights. No signs of anything approaching. Just the quiet. You exhale slowly, letting the tension ease just a fraction. Another hour, perhaps, without incident. Up here, that counts as success. Eventually you step back from the wall, turning toward the stairs again. The stone beneath your boots feels just as cold as before, but at least moving gives you something to focus on. The wind fades slightly as you descend, replaced by the more familiar stillness of the streets below. And as you return to the maze of narrow paths and flickering torches, you carry that cold with you, a reminder of where you've been and of the long night that still stretches ahead. Because if the walls are quiet, the streets rarely stay that way for long. The quiet never lasts as long as you expect. Back down in the streets, the cold lingers in your bones, but the air feels heavier again, less open, more crowded with the unseen details of the town. The walls may watch the outside world, but down here, you watch the people. And people, even when they're mostly asleep, have a way of leaving behind problems. You turn into a side street you haven't passed through yet tonight. It's narrower than most, with uneven walls and a faint smell that suggests this is where things are thrown rather than carefully disposed of. Your boots make a softer sound here, the ground slightly damp, absorbing each step instead of echoing it. Step, clink, step, clink. The rhythm continues, but something feels off, not immediately obvious, just a subtle shift in the atmosphere, the kind of feeling you're starting to recognise, the quiet hint that something isn't quite as it should be. You slow down. Ahead, near a doorway, there's movement. A figure crouched low, partially hidden by shadow. At first, you think it might just be someone sleeping rough, trying to stay out of the wind. It wouldn't be the first time. Not everyone in town has the comfort of a proper bed. But then the figure moves again, quickly, and not like someone settling in. You step forward, your voice cutting through the stillness. You there. The figure freezes, then slowly they stand. A young man this time, thin, quick-eyed, his posture tense in a way that immediately sets your instincts on edge. He doesn't run, yet, but he looks like he's considering it. Your gaze drops briefly to his hands. Empty. But that doesn't mean much. "What are you doing?" you ask. He shrugs, a little too casually. "Nothing." "Of course." You glance toward the doorway behind him. The door itself looks intact, but there's something about the latch. Slightly off. Not broken, just disturbed. You step closer. He steps back. That's when you hear it. A faint metallic clink from somewhere near his side. Your grip tightens on the spear. "Turn around," you say. He hesitates, just for a second. Then, he bolts. You react without thinking. Your body lurches forward, boots striking the ground harder now, armour shifting awkwardly with the sudden movement. The spear becomes less of a tool and more of an inconvenience as you try to move faster than it was ever designed for. The alley twists ahead of him, narrow and uneven. The kind of path clearly built for walking, not chasing. A real historical fact, medieval town guards were not exactly trained athletes. Most were ordinary men with basic equipment, expected to enforce order rather than engage in high-speed pursuits, which means what you're doing right now is far from ideal. You round the first corner, nearly slipping on the damp ground. He's still ahead, darting left, then right, moving with the kind of familiarity that suggests he knows these streets far better than you do. Of course he does. This is his world. You're just passing through it. Stop, you shout, though you know it's unlikely to work. It doesn't. Historians still argue how effective guards were at actually catching criminals in situations like this. Without coordinated systems, proper lighting, or communication, most pursuits relied heavily on luck and the terrain. Right now, the terrain is winning. You push forward, your breath already starting to tighten, your legs protesting the sudden shift from slow patrol to frantic chase. The weight of your armour feels doubled, every piece pulling against your movement. Ahead, the young man squeezes through a narrow gap between two buildings, barely wide enough for a person. You reach it seconds later and hesitate. You can follow, but it will slow you down even more, and if he has friends waiting on the other side. There's a quirky but unsettling detail about medieval crime. Pickpockets and small-time thieves often worked in groups, especially in tighter parts of town. One distracts, one runs, another waits. You pause, just long enough to think. Then you step back. Because chasing blindly into a space like that isn't bravery, it's a mistake. You listen instead. Footsteps fade quickly on the other side, then silence. He's gone. You stand there for a moment, catching your breath, the cold air biting into your lungs as they work to steady themselves again. Frustration settles in, quiet but persistent. Not loud, not dramatic, just there. You return to the doorway where you first saw him. The latch, now that you look closer, has definitely been tampered with. Not broken, just loosened. A test, maybe. A first attempt. You push gently. The door creaks open. Inside, it's dark, quiet. No immediate signs that anything has been taken. Not yet. You close it again carefully. A near miss. Or maybe just a delayed one. Either way, it's a reminder. Not all crimes are loud. Not all problems announce themselves with raised voices or visible tension. Some slip quietly through the cracks, moving fast, leaving little behind except the faint suggestion that something almost happened. You step back into the street, adjusting your grip on the spear once more. Your breathing steadies, your heartbeat slows, the rhythm returns. Step, clink, step, clink. But now there's an edge to it, a sharper awareness. Because you've just been reminded that while you're out here walking predictable routes, others are moving unpredictably, faster, quieter, and with far less to lose. You glance once more at the narrow gap where the young man disappeared. Then you turn away. Because the night doesn't give you time to dwell. There are more streets to cover, more corners to check, more small, unseen moments unfolding just beyond your reach, and somewhere out there, you know, he's still moving. By the time you reach the marketplace, the night feels like it has settled into a quieter rhythm again. But the marketplace never truly rests. Even now, long after the stalls have closed and the crowds have disappeared, the space carries a different kind of energy. During the day, this would be the busiest part of town. Voices layered over voices, merchants shouting prices, coins clinking, arguments sparking and fading like quick flashes. At night, it's emptier, but not peaceful. You step into the open square slowly, your boots sounding slightly louder here against the packed ground. Without the press of people, every movement feels exposed. The shadows stretch wider, pooling beneath empty stalls and abandoned carts. A few wooden frames stand where cloth awnings once hung, now tied down or removed entirely. Barrels sit stacked near the edges, some covered, some not. The remains of the day linger everywhere. Scraps, footprints, the faint smell of spices and livestock. It's quiet. Too quiet. You scan the area carefully, because if there's one place in town where small crimes thrive, it's here. A real historical fact, marketplaces were prime locations for pickpockets in medieval towns. Crowds made it easy to slip unnoticed, and even after hours, Unattended goods or poorly secured stalls could attract opportunistic thieves. You move deeper into the square, your eyes adjusting to the wider space. Something shifts behind one of the stalls. You stop instantly. There it is again. That subtle flicker of movement, just enough to catch your attention. You angle your body slightly, spear lowering just a fraction, not in attack but in readiness. "Who's there?" you call out. Silence. Then a soft rustle. You step forward, slow and deliberate, circling the stall rather than approaching it head-on. The wood creaks faintly as the wind brushes against it, adding just enough noise to make everything harder to read. Another step. Another. Then a figure darts up from behind the stall, smaller this time, faster. A child. He freezes the moment he sees you, eyes wide, breath quick, as if he's been caught doing something far more serious than he expected. For a second, neither of you speaks. Then you notice what he's holding, a small cloth bundle. Your gaze sharpens slightly. "Show me," you say. He hesitates. Of course he does. Then slowly he unwraps it. Inside, bits of food. Bread. Maybe a piece of dried meat. Nothing valuable in the grand sense, but enough to matter to someone. You exhale quietly. This isn't the kind of crime that makes for dramatic stories, but it's the kind you see often. Historians still argue about how strictly laws were enforced against minor theft, especially when it involved children or the poor. Some towns were harsh, using punishment as a deterrent. Others look the other way, depending on the circumstances. You look at the boy again. He can't be more than 10, thin, tired, watching you carefully, like he's already preparing for the worst. "There's a reason these stalls are closed," you say, your voice steady but not sharp. He nods quickly. "I know." "Then why are you here?" He shrugs. But it's not casual like the others you've questioned tonight. It's smaller, heavier. Hungry. Simple. Honest. A quirky detail about medieval marketplaces. Leftover food wasn't always carefully stored or guarded overnight. Sometimes scraps were left behind, intentionally or not, and people who had little would come searching for whatever they could find. You glance around the square. No stall owners, no witnesses, just you, the boy, and the quiet aftermath of a busy day. Your grip on the spear loosens slightly. This isn't like the man at the gate, not like the thief who ran. This is different. You crouch just a little, bringing yourself closer to his level. Not out of kindness exactly, but practicality. It's easier to speak this way. "You take from the wrong place," you say, and someone notices. He nods again. "I know. But you did it anyway." Another nod. There's no defiance here, just acceptance. You glance at the bundle again. It's not much, barely enough for a proper meal, and yet enough to make this moment matter. You straighten slowly, your joints protesting slightly from the movement. The night stretches around you, quiet and watchful. You could take it from him, report it, follow the rules exactly as they're written, or you exhale. "Go," you say. He blinks, as if he didn't hear you correctly. "Go," you repeat, a little firmer this time, "and don't come back here tonight." He doesn't argue, doesn't hesitate. He wraps the bundle quickly and slips past you, moving fast but not running, disappearing into the shadows between the stalls and out into the narrower streets beyond. Gone in seconds. You remain where you are for a moment, staring at the space he left behind. Another decision. Another quiet deviation from what the job technically demands. There's a strange pattern forming tonight. Rules, and the moments you bend them. You stand there a little longer, scanning the marketplace again. Empty. Still. But now it feels different. Not just a place where things are sold and stolen, but a place where people survive, in whatever ways they can. You adjust your grip on the spear once more, rolling your shoulders as the familiar weight settles back in. The rhythm returns. Step, clink, step, clink. And as you move toward the edge of the square, leaving the empty stalls behind, you carry that small moment with you. Not heavy, not overwhelming, just present. Because out here, in the quiet hours of the night, the line between law and understanding isn't always as clear as you thought it would be, and you're starting to feel that more with every step. The marketplace fades behind you, but the feeling it leaves doesn't. Something about that quiet interaction lingers, not in a heavy way, not enough to slow your steps, but just enough to sit at the back of your mind as you move through the winding streets again. The rhythm returns, steady and familiar, but your thoughts feel slightly less certain than they did before. Step, clink, step, clink. You turn down another street, this one leading gradually toward the outer edge of town again. The buildings thin out slightly here, giving way to small open spaces, storage sheds, and the occasional fenced enclosure for animals that are thankfully quiet tonight. The wind feels different. Not colder exactly, but more open, carrying sounds from beyond the walls more clearly than before. You notice it when you pause. A faint echo, distant. You tilt your head, listening carefully. There it is again. Not a voice. Not quite. Something rhythmic. You glance at your partner, who has stopped as well, his posture shifting subtly from casual patrol to something more alert. "You hear that?" he murmurs. You nod, because now it's clearer. A distant thudding sound. Soft. Repeated. Hooves. Your grip tightens on the spear almost immediately. That changes things. A real historical fact. Guards were often responsible for watching for approaching riders at night, especially in regions where raids or bandit activity were common. Horses could cover ground quickly, and an unexpected arrival after dark was rarely a good sign. You both move without needing to say anything more, heading toward the nearest access point to the wall. Your pace quickens, not a run, but close enough that your armor begins to shift more heavily with each step. The sound grows slightly louder, still distant, but approaching. Historians still argue how quickly towns could respond to potential threats like this. Without centralized systems or rapid communication, much depended on how early something was noticed and how seriously it was taken. You reach the steps and begin to climb again, your legs already protesting from earlier. The cold greets you at the top just as before, but this time you barely notice it. Your focus is outward, into the dark. You move to the parapet, scanning the horizon, trying to locate the source of the sound. There, far off, a faint shape, then another. Movement against the darkness, subtle, but unmistakable once you see it. Riders, at least two, maybe more, moving along the distant road. Your heartbeat picks up slightly. Not panic, just awareness. Your partner leans forward slightly, squinting. "Too fast for traders," he mutters. You nod again. Traders don't usually travel like that at this hour. Too risky. Too unnecessary. These riders have a reason. The question is, what kind? A quirky historical detail. Not all nighttime riders were hostile. Messengers, couriers, or even officials could travel late under urgent circumstances. But from a guard's perspective, you don't assume the best. You prepare for the worst and adjust from there. You watch them carefully. Their pace doesn't slow. Their direction stays steady. Toward the town. That's enough. Your partner turns immediately, heading toward the nearest bell post. No hesitation. No debate. You remain at the wall, eyes fixed on the approaching figures, trying to gather as much information as you can before things escalate. How many? Still hard to tell. 2 for certain. Maybe a third. No visible torches. That's not reassuring. Behind you, the bell rings. Sharp. Loud. Different from the slow, steady toll that marks the hours. This one is urgent, deliberate, cutting through the night like a command rather than a reminder. It echoes across the town instantly. Everything changes. Below, doors open, voices rise, movement spreads like a ripple through the streets. People wake not gently this time, but abruptly, pulled from sleep into uncertainty. The riders continue, closer now. You can see them more clearly, dark shapes against a slightly lighter horizon, their movement steady, purposeful. Historians often debate whether such alarms cause more panic than preparation. Standing here, you can see both happening at once. Some will prepare, others will worry. Many will simply wait and hope it's nothing serious. You step back from the wall as another guard arrives beside you, slightly out of breath. "What do we have?" he asks. "Riders," you reply, approaching fast. He nods, his expression tightening slightly. No one says it out loud, but everyone is thinking it. This could be trouble. Below, more guards begin to gather, moving with a mix of urgency and controlled purpose. Weapons are checked, Positions are taken. The gate, already closed, is reinforced, its heavy structure becoming even more significant now. You glance outward one more time. The riders slow slightly as they near the town. That's something, not a charge, not an immediate threat, but still uncertain. Your partner returns, his breath visible in the cold air. Gates secured, he says. They'll have to announce themselves. Good, that gives you time. A little. You watch as the riders approach the outer edge of the torchlight's reach. Their shapes become clearer, cloaks, horses, movement that suggests urgency but not chaos. Messengers? Maybe. Bandits trying to look like something else? Also possible. You feel that familiar tension again, the one that sits quietly beneath your calm, reminding you that your job isn't just about reacting, it's about judging, quickly, accurately, or at least, well enough. The lead rider raises a hand as they approach, slowing further now. That's a good sign, usually. But you don't relax, not yet, because nights like this have a way of shifting quickly, and you've already learned, over the course of this long watch, that certainty is a rare luxury out here. You step forward slightly, positioning yourself for what comes next, because whatever these riders bring with them, message, trouble, or something in between, it's about to arrive at your gate. The tension doesn't disappear once the riders stop. It just changes shape. From the wall, you watch as they pull their horses to a halt just beyond the gate, close enough to be seen clearly now, but still held at a distance by thick wood and iron. Their breath fogs in the cold air, rising in small clouds that drift upward and vanish into the night. 3 of them. You were right. Cloaked, travel-worn, not heavily armed, at least not in any obvious way. That helps, but only a little. One of them steps forward slightly, raising his hands just enough to show he's not reaching for a weapon. Message, he calls out. His voice carries, steady and practiced. That word alone eases some of the tension below. Not all of it, but enough. A real historical fact. Mounted messengers were a vital part of medieval communication. With no centralized postal systems as we know them today, important news, whether political, military or economic, often travelled by riders who moved quickly between towns, sometimes day and night. You descend from the wall with the others, your steps quicker than before but more controlled now. The urgency is still there, but it's focused, directed. At the gate, a small group of guards has already gathered, along with a senior figure whose posture alone suggests authority. He stands just inside the closed doors, listening as the rider repeats his call. Message for the town council, the rider says again. Urgent. The senior guard studies him for a moment. From where? The rider names a place. Distant enough to matter, close enough to be relevant. You don't know much about it, but the reaction from the others suggests it's not just a random village. Important, then. Historians still argue how information like this was verified in the moment. Without modern identification or instant confirmation, towns had to rely on judgment, assessing the rider's appearance, behaviour, and the consistency of their story. You watch closely. The rider doesn't hesitate, doesn't shift nervously. His answers come quickly, but not too quickly. Convincing. The senior guard nods once. Open a panel, he orders. Not the whole gate. Just a small reinforced hatch built into one side, large enough for limited interaction, small enough to maintain security. It creaks open slowly, revealing a narrow space between inside and out. The rider dismounts and steps forward, reaching into his cloak. Every movement is watched, carefully. He pulls out a sealed document, holding it up before passing it through the opening. The seal catches the torchlight briefly. Wax, marked with a symbol you don't quite recognise. But someone does. The senior guard takes it, examining it closely. His expression shifts slightly. Not dramatically, but enough to suggest recognition. That matters. He breaks the seal, unrolls the parchment, reads. Silence settles again, but it's a different kind this time. Not tense, not uncertain, just waiting. You glance at the other guards. They're watching too, each of them trying to read the reaction on the senior guard's face, looking for clues about what kind of news has just arrived. Good? Bad? Something in between? A quirky detail about medieval messages. Many were written in formal, often complex language, sometimes requiring interpretation even by those meant to receive them. Not every guard would understand the contents directly, which adds another layer of uncertainty to moments like this. The senior guard finishes reading, rolls the parchment closed. He looks up at the rider. "You'll wait," he says. The rider nods once, no argument, no impatience. That's another good sign. You feel the tension ease just a little more. Not gone, but reduced. The immediate threat, if there was one, seems unlikely now. Still, procedures remain. The panel closes again, sealing the gate once more. The riders remain outside, their silhouettes steady in the torchlight, waiting for whatever comes next. Inside, movement begins again. Messengers are sent, this time within the town. Someone needs to inform the council, or whoever holds authority at this hour. Doors will be knocked on, sleep will be interrupted, decisions will be made, and you wait. Because that's part of the job too. Not just action, not just patrol, but these pauses in between, where something important is happening just out of your reach. You lean slightly against the inner wall, shifting your weight to ease the constant pressure on your legs. The armour feels heavier again now that you've stopped moving, the cold settling back in around it. Your partner exhales slowly beside you. "Could have been worse," he says. You nod. "It could have. A lot worse. No attack, no immediate danger, just information, whatever it may be." Historians often debate how much of a guard's duty involved moments like this versus actual confrontation. Standing here now, you get the sense that much of the job is exactly this. Being present when something happens, even if you're not the one directly shaping the outcome. Time stretches again, not as long as before, but long enough to feel it. Eventually footsteps return. A figure approaches, better dressed than most, clearly not someone pulled from sleep at random. He moves with purpose, taking the parchment from the senior guard and reading it quickly, his brow tightening slightly as he does. There it is again, that subtle shift, not panic, not relief, something more measured. He nods once, then turns toward the gate. "Let them in," he says. Just like that. Decision made. The heavy mechanisms begin to move again, wood grinding softly against stone as the gate opens just enough to admit the riders one at a time. You step aside, watching as they enter. Up close, they look even more tired than before. Faces drawn, cloaks dusted with the road, movement slower now that the urgency of arrival has passed. One of them glances at you briefly as he passes, not hostile, not friendly, just acknowledging. Then they're inside. The gate closes again behind them, sealing the town once more. And just like that, the moment passes. The urgency fades. The night settles back into its quieter rhythm, though something beneath it has shifted. News has arrived. Something beyond these walls is changing, even if you don't yet know what. You adjust your grip on the spear again, rolling your shoulders as the familiar weight settles back into place. Because whatever that message means, your job doesn't change. The streets still need watching. The night still stretches ahead. And somewhere between now and dawn you know there will be more moments like this. Quiet, uncertain, and just important enough to keep you from ever fully relaxing. The gate closes with a heavy finality that seems to echo longer than it should. For a moment everything feels settled again. The riders are inside, the message is delivered, and whatever urgency brought them here has shifted away from you, and into the hands of people who sleep in warmer rooms under thicker blankets, making decisions you'll likely never hear in full. But the night doesn't return to normal quite so easily, because now the town is awake. Not fully, not like midday, not like market hours, but awake enough that the silence has changed. Doors creak open just a little. Windows glow faintly with candlelight. Voices murmur behind walls that were quiet not long ago. You can feel it as you step away from the gate again. That subtle hum of awareness. Your partner stretches his arms with a quiet groan, armour creaking in response. "Well," he mutters, "that's something to talk about tomorrow." You let out a small breath, somewhere between agreement and quiet amusement. Because yes, this will become a story. Everything does, eventually. But for now, it's still just part of the night. You resume your patrol, boots finding that familiar rhythm against the uneven ground. The torchlight flickers as you pass, casting long shifting shadows that seem almost alive for a moment, before settling back into stillness. Step. Clink. Step. Clink. The streets feel different now. Not dangerous. Not even tense. Just alert. A real historical fact. When alarms were raised in medieval towns, whether for fire, attack or unexpected arrivals, guards often increased patrol frequency afterward. It wasn't just about the immediate situation, but the possibility that something else might follow. So you walk a little more carefully, listen a little more closely. Every sound stands out just a bit more than before. A door closing somewhere behind you. Footsteps. Quick, then slowing, as someone decides not to be out longer than necessary. A faint cough from an upstairs window. Normal things, but now they feel sharper, more noticeable. Historians still argue whether this kind of heightened alertness made towns safer, or simply made people more anxious. From where you stand, it feels like a bit of both. You turn down a narrow alley, one you've passed through several times already tonight. The walls here lean inward slightly, creating a tight corridor where the torchlight struggles to reach every corner. Your hand instinctively tightens on the spear. Not because you expect something, just because this is the kind of place where something could happen. A quirky detail. Some medieval guards carried small rattles or noisemakers specifically for dark alleys like this, using sound to startle anyone hiding in the shadows. You don't have one of those. Just your voice, your presence, and the faint metallic whisper of your armour. Guard, your partner calls softly, more out of habit than necessity. The word echoes briefly, then fades. No response. Good. You continue through, emerging back into a slightly wider street where the air feels less confined. A dog barks in the distance, sharp, sudden, then quiet again. You pause, listening. Dogs are often the first to notice things people miss. But after a moment, nothing follows. No footsteps, no voices, no movement that doesn't belong. You move on. The night stretches forward again, its rhythm returning slowly, like a heartbeat settling after a brief rush. Time becomes difficult to measure. Minutes feel longer, hours feel uncertain. At some point the bell rings again, steady this time, marking the passing of another hour. The sound rolls over the rooftops, familiar and grounding, a reminder that the night is still moving forward even if it doesn't always feel like it. You count the chimes automatically, a habit, a way to anchor yourself. Your partner exhales quietly. Closer to dawn, he says. You nod, not close enough, but closer. You pass near the marketplace again, now completely still. The stalls are dark, the earlier traces of activity gone, leaving only the shapes of wooden frames and empty spaces where people stood not long ago. It's strange how quickly a place can change. Busy, loud, alive, then silent, empty, waiting. Historians often debate how people in medieval towns perceived night compared to day. For many, night wasn't just a quieter version of the same world. It was something entirely different, filled with uncertainty, superstition, and the constant awareness of what couldn't be seen. You feel that now, not fear, just awareness. You continue walking, step, clink, step, clink. Your legs ache more noticeably now, each movement requiring just a bit more effort than before. The armour presses heavier against your shoulders, the cold finding its way through even the thicker layers of fabric beneath. You shift your grip on the spear again, flexing your fingers slightly to keep them from stiffening. Another street, another corner, another stretch of quiet, and then the bell rings again. Not the steady, measured tone of the hour. This one is sharper, faster. Your head lifts immediately. Your partner does the same. You both freeze for just a moment, listening as the sound continues. Urgent, deliberate, unmistakable. The alarm bell. Again. Your chest tightens slightly, not with panic, but with recognition. This isn't the riders. This is something else. A real historical fact. Medieval towns relied heavily on alarm bells to signal emergencies, fires, attacks, or major disturbances. The specific pattern or intensity of the ringing could indicate the type of threat, though not always clearly. Fire, your partner says. Maybe, you reply, but you're already moving, because whatever it is, you don't wait to find out. You follow the sound, your pace quickening as the bell continues to ring, echoing through the streets, bouncing off stone and wood, pulling people from their homes once more. Voices rise again, doors open wider this time, someone shouts. Another voice answers. The quiet night breaks apart, replaced by movement and urgency that feels sharper than before. You turn a corner, and there it is. A glow, faint at first, then clearer, flickering orange against the dark. Fire, not large, not yet, but enough. Enough to matter, enough to act. You feel your grip tighten on the spear before you shift it aside, already knowing it won't be much use here. Because tonight your job isn't just to watch, it's to respond. And as the bell continues to ring above you, loud and insistent, you step forward into the growing light. The night once again changing around you in ways that refuse to let you drift too far into comfort. The glow pulls you forward before you even fully register what you're seeing. Fire always does that. Not because it's inviting, but because it demands attention in a way nothing else does. The flickering light dances across the nearby walls, stretching shadows into long, uneasy shapes that shift with every movement of the flames. You move faster now, boots striking harder against the ground, your breath coming quicker in the cold air. By the time you reach the source, a small crowd has already gathered. Too close. They always stand too close. Back, someone shouts, though it's unclear who said it first. Maybe another guard, maybe just someone with enough sense to recognize the danger. The fire itself is contained, for now. A wooden cart partially covered with rough cloth has caught. The flames lick upward hungrily, catching on the fabric, then the wood beneath, spreading in uneven bursts that crackle and pop as they grow. Not a building, that's the first relief. But it's close enough to one that your chest tightens anyway. A real historical fact. Fire was one of the greatest dangers in medieval towns, where buildings were often made of wood and packed tightly together. Even a small blaze could spread rapidly if not controlled quickly. "Water!" someone yells. And that's when the organised chaos begins. Buckets appear. Where from, you're not entirely sure. Passed from hand to hand, sloshing as people move too quickly, spilling as much as they carry. A line begins to form, uneven at first, then slowly tightening into something more efficient. You step in without hesitation. Your spear is set aside, leaning against a nearby wall. For now, it's useless. What matters is speed, coordination, and a bit of luck. You grab a bucket as it's thrust toward you, heavier than you expect, the water inside already sloshing over the edge as you turn toward the flames. The heat hits you immediately, not overwhelming, but noticeable, a sharp contrast to the cold that's been clinging to you all night. You throw the water forward, it hisses as it hits, steam rising in a brief cloud before vanishing into the night air. Not enough, not yet. "Again!" someone calls, and again you turn, grabbing another bucket, passing the empty one back without even looking. This is how it works. No time to think, just repeat. A quirky historical detail. In some towns, people were required by law to keep buckets of water ready at night specifically for fires. Failure to do so could result in fines, or worse, because everyone's safety depended on quick response. You can see why. The flames shift as more water hits them, shrinking slightly in some places while flaring stubbornly in others. The cloth collapses inward, partially burned, exposing more of the wooden structure beneath. That's the danger. Once the wood fully catches, it becomes harder to stop. You move faster. Bucket, turn, throw. Bucket, turn, throw. Your arms begin to ache, but there's no time to notice it properly. The rhythm takes over, your body working on instinct more than thought. Around you, voices overlap. Keep it coming. Watch the side. Don't let it spread. Historians still argue how effective these bucket brigades truly were. Without modern equipment, success often depended on how quickly the fire was noticed, and how many people responded in time. Tonight, you might be early enough. The flames begin to shrink more noticeably now, their edges pulling inward as repeated waves of water dampen their reach. The crackling softens slightly, though it doesn't disappear entirely. Smoke thickens instead, rising in a darker column that stings your eyes and throat. You cough once, briefly, then keep going. Because stopping isn't an option. Not yet. Your partner appears beside you, equally soaked, his face flushed from heat and effort. He doesn't say anything, just grabs a bucket and joins the rhythm. You catch his eye for a moment, a quick acknowledgement, then back to work. Time blurs again. Not in the slow, stretched way of earlier, but in a faster, more compressed sense where each moment blends into the next without clear edges. At some point, someone shouts, "It's dying!" And they're right. The flames are smaller now, reduced to stubborn patches that cling to the last dry pieces of wood. The cloth is mostly gone, collapsed into blackened scraps that smoulder rather than burn. You throw another bucket. Steam rises, the fire hisses, and then it's almost gone. A few final bursts, a few lingering embers, then just smoke, thick, heavy, lingering, but no longer spreading. You step back slightly, breathing harder now, your chest rising and falling as the adrenaline begins to fade. The cold returns almost immediately, creeping back in to replace the heat that had briefly pushed it away. Your hands feel stiff again, your arms heavy, but the danger, the real danger, has passed. A quiet settles over the crowd, not the same quiet as before, but something softer, relieved, tired. People begin to disperse slowly, voices lowering, movements less urgent now that the worst is over. You glance at the remains of the cart, charred, broken, useless, but still better than what it could have become. Much better. A real historical observation. Many medieval fires were caused by simple accidents: an unattended candle, a stray spark, a cooking fire left too long. Rarely dramatic, often devastating. Tonight, it was caught in time. You retrieve your spear, wiping your damp hands briefly on your tunic before gripping it again. It feels familiar, grounding, like returning to your role after briefly stepping outside of it. Your partner exhales slowly. "Could have been bad," he says. You nod. It almost was. Historians still debate whether guards were expected to act as firefighters or simply maintain order during such events. In practice, you suspect the answer was simple. You do whatever is needed, because there's no one else to do it. The bell has stopped now. Its silence feels almost strange after the urgency of its ringing. The town begins to settle again. Not fully, not yet, but moving in that direction. You take one last look at the smouldering remains before turning away, your steps slower now, heavier with fatigue, because the night isn't over, not quite, but you can feel it approaching its end. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, beyond the walls, the first hint of morning is beginning to think about arriving, and you're still here, still walking, still watching, waiting for the moment when the long, stretched hours of darkness finally give way to something softer, something quieter, something that feels like rest. The smoke lingers longer than the fire. Even as you walk away, you can still smell it faintly in the air, sharp, dry, clinging to your clothes and settling somewhere in the back of your throat. It follows you through the streets like a quiet reminder of how quickly things can change and how quickly they can almost become something worse. But the flames are gone, and the town is settling again. Your steps slow naturally now, not because you choose to, but because your body has begun to understand something your mind hasn't fully accepted yet. The night is ending. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just gradually. The darkness feels thinner somehow, less absolute than it did before. The sky above is still deep and heavy, but there's a softness creeping in at its edges, a suggestion that something beyond it is beginning to shift. You notice it in the quiet. It's different now. Not the deep, uncertain quiet of midnight, and not the restless alertness that followed the alarm. This is something in between, a kind of waiting quiet, as if the entire town is holding its breath just before exhaling into morning. A real historical fact. Many medieval town guards worked shifts that stretched from dusk until dawn, with sunrise marking not just the end of duty, but the transition of responsibility from night watch to day activity. You feel that transition approaching, in your legs, in your shoulders, in the way your grip on the spear loosens slightly, not out of carelessness, but out of quiet relief. Step, clink, step, clink. The rhythm is slower now, softer. Your partner walks beside you in near silence. His earlier energy faded into the same kind of steady exhaustion that settled over you. Every now and then he shifts his weight or rolls his shoulders, small movements meant to ease discomfort that won't fully go away until he's finally allowed to rest. You pass the marketplace again, still empty, still quiet, but no longer lifeless. There's a faint sense of anticipation here now, as if the stalls themselves are waiting to be filled again, to return to the noise and movement that defined them during the day. You glance at the spot where the cart had been earlier. Just a dark patch remains. Already it feels like something that happened a long time ago, even though you can still smell the smoke. Historians still argue how guards processed nights like this, whether each event lingered, shaping how they approached the next, or whether fatigue simply washed it all away, leaving only the immediate present. Right now, it feels like both. You remember the riders, the bell, the fire, but they sit lightly in your mind, like distant echoes rather than heavy thoughts. Another sound reaches you, faint, soft, a bird, just one, then another. You stop for a moment, listening, because that's new. That didn't exist earlier. A quirky historical detail. In many places, the natural sounds of dawn, birds, livestock stirring, distant movement, were often more reliable indicators of morning than any clock or bell. You breathe in slowly. The air feels different now, less sharp, less cold. Or maybe you've just stopped noticing it as much. Either way, something is changing. You continue walking, but there's less urgency in it now. Your patrol is still your duty, but it feels less like vigilance and more like completion, like you're guiding the night gently toward its end rather than guarding against what might still happen. The streets begin to shift. A door opens, then another. Someone steps outside, wrapping a cloak tighter around themselves as they glance at the sky. A brief nod is exchanged as you pass. Not a conversation, not even a greeting, just a quiet acknowledgement that you've both been awake while the rest of the world slept. You pass a baker's shop. There's light inside. Warm, soft. And for a moment, the faint smell of fresh bread replaces the lingering smoke in your senses. It's comforting, in a simple, grounded way. A reminder that the day is coming, and with it, a return to things that feel ordinary, predictable, safe. Your partner exhales, a long, slow breath. Almost there, he says. You nod, because now you can feel it too. Not just the idea of dawn, but the certainty of it. The sky lightens gradually, shifting from deep black to something softer. Dark blue, then grey at the edges. The shapes of buildings become clearer, less dependent on torchlight, more defined by the natural light returning to the world. The torches themselves seem less important now. Their flickering glow fades into the background, no longer the primary source of vision. You take one last turn through the streets, completing the path you've walked so many times tonight. It feels familiar in a way that's almost comforting now, each corner and shadow known, each sound expected. Nothing new, nothing hidden, just the quiet end of a long watch. A real historical note. In some towns, guards would formally announce the end of their shift at dawn, marking the transition with a call or a final bell. In others, it was less ceremonial, just a quiet handover as the day began. Here, it feels like the latter. No grand moment, no dramatic conclusion, just an ending. You return toward the gate one last time, the same place where the night began. It looks different now, less imposing, less uncertain, just a structure, a boundary that did its job. You rest your hand briefly against the wood, feeling its solid, familiar presence beneath your fingers. Then you step back. Because your part is done. The sky continues to lighten, the first real hints of sunrise beginning to touch the horizon beyond the walls. The town stirs more fully now. Voices rising, footsteps increasing, life returning in steady, predictable waves. And you finally let your shoulders relax. Just a little. Not completely, but enough. Because you made it through the night. No glory, no great story, just quiet work, done well enough. And as the last traces of darkness slip away, replaced by the soft growing light of morning, you begin to move away from the gate. Your steps no longer part of a patrol, but part of something simpler, rest. The light continues to spread slowly, gently washing over the rooftops, softening the edges of everything it touches. The sounds of the town grow steadier, more familiar, blending into a calm, waking rhythm that no longer demands your attention. Your steps slow further, then slow again, until they almost match the quiet pace of your breathing. The weight of the night begins to lift, not all at once, but in small, almost unnoticeable pieces. The tension, the alertness, the constant listening, it fades, replaced by something softer, something quieter. You don't need to watch every shadow now. You don't need to listen for every sound. The world is visible again, predictable again, safe enough. And as you move further from the gate, from the walls, from the long stretch of darkness that defined your hours, you feel that quiet sense of completion settle in. Not pride, not relief, just stillness. The kind that comes when something has ended exactly as it should. No more, no less. Your grip loosens, your shoulders drop, your breath evens out, and the last fragments of the night drift away behind you, dissolving into memory as the morning takes their place. Now there's nothing left to do. Now you can finally rest.